God and Other Delicacies has a weekly newsletter. If you'd like to subscribe, email me at godsdelicateshow@gmail.com and I'll put you on the list. Hello, everyone. Welcome to God and Other Delicacies. I'm Nicholas D'Augusto. I get to talk to people about God on this show. It's a lot of fun for me. I'm glad you're here. I hope you enjoy it. Let's do it. Today, I have the privilege of welcoming Eliza Clark to the show. Eliza is a prolific writer of both television and theater. For the last 4 years, she's operated as both writer and executive producer on the TNT series Animal Kingdom, and prior to that has written for series like Extant and The Killing. Her plays have been produced in New York, Los Angeles, and all over the country, and I had the honor of originating the role of Brock Silver in the world premiere of her play QUACK at the Kirk Douglas Theater here in LA. I can guarantee Brock would handle this conversation much differently than I will now. Welcome to the show, Eliza.
Hello.
All right.
Yeah, I would love to see Brock do this kind of radio show. He was a very bad person.
Yes, he was a bad person, but I wonder if there's one or two listeners out there that would relate to Brock. Do you think there are listeners to this show that will relate to Brock?
Yes, I also think. Not that we are talking about my play, but you made that character so likable that I think a lot of people were like, "Oh my God, I like him."
Oh, I loved it. I was so thankful that I got cast in that show. Yeah. So for the listeners out there, Brock was he was a men's rights activist. Is the best non-negative way to say that. And he had what people would call misogynistic views. But he, just felt like they were healthy, traditional views.
Yeah.
And so my job was to make and to bring those views, which are not altogether illogical.
No.
And Eliza did a really amazing job of writing a character who wasn't instantly, he in fact was very likable for quite some time before you start to hear some of his lines and you're like, I'm not sure I agree with that, although I like this person. And so it was really fun to work on that character and have him brought to life. It's actually the first time I think I've ever gotten to play a guy that was that conflicting for me, which is one of the reasons I sing its praises. All right, so the first question is, what did you have for breakfast?
I shared a banana with my 11-month-old because I needed to take a Tylenol cold and sinus.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't want to take it on an empty stomach, but I tend not to eat breakfast. That's why I
really?
sound like this. I sound incredibly sexy, but I ordinarily do not sound this sexy. I sound sexy? I might actually sound like a sick, crazy person.
I absolutely think. I think sexy is definitely one of the qualities.
Yes, sure.
I think I look forward to hearing the listener responses. I'm gonna have I'm gonna put it up on the webpage. Just be like a little vote. What's
sexy?
Eliza
They're like,
sexy?
she sounds like a longtime smoker in a bad way.
And some people will find that sexy.
Sure.
How much does when you split a banana with your children?
Yeah.
You have two. And when you split your banana with your children, what's the delineation most of the time? How much of the banana do you get to eat?
They get as much as they want,
right?
And I get 3 bites.
Yes.
Whatever. Am I allowed to swear on this?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
They get all the fucking banana.
Yeah, we did
it. Yeah.
But your 11-month-old is healthy. Are you the only one that was sick this time?
No, he was kind of sick, but as you know, the kids get it and they go through it in a day because their little immune system. It's you understand why evil geniuses want to suck the blood of young things to regain their youth because they get they get something that you're like, oh God, this is going to be all week, and then they're fine in a day.
I know. I feel
and then you're down for 10 days.
Well. And my son got he had a little rash on his back because we went to the ocean and I think some sand and salt water and stuff kind of got on his back for a second and we put lotion. He was like, oh, it's itching, and put a little lotion on it. I think it was gone before he went to bed practically. It was amazing how regenerative.
My older child, when he was 18 months old, he hit his head on the corner of a banister, like really bad, so bad that we called the doctor to be like, is he gonna die? And she was like, just wake him up in the middle of the night, and if he knows who you are, it's fine. I was like, whoa. So we did that, and then of course he was awake. He did know who we were, and he was like, I don't want to go back to bed.
Your doctor was 170 years old,
yeah,
right?
Obviously, I don't know. And then the next morning it was like gone.
Just smack him awake.
Yeah.
No,
Anyway.
I'm sorry. The next morning.
No. The like crazy black and blue bruise was like completely gone.
Yeah, that's amazing. Oh, we can go down this road for a long time, but my poor little guy, he just nailed his chin on something the other day. And it's so funny, like he's had this mark. That one stayed for him a little bit. He doesn't have like the magical cure on that one.
Yeah.
But he forgets about it. You know, it's amazing how they forget. Like the minute the pain isn't there, it's just that age is really sweet because they respond to everything, but they forget so quickly.
Totally.
It's an amazing process to watch them sort of just have it pass through in that way. All right, so we filtered just far enough away from the breakfast conversation, I think, to ask the next question, which of course you know what it is. How and when were you introduced to the idea of God in your life?
So my mom was raised very seriously Roman Catholic. Like she's the youngest of 5 in a very Catholic family.
And what part of the country was she in?
Her dad worked was in the Navy, and they traveled around, but like they lived in Rome for a period of time. And she tells this, my mom was like, had really serious ADHD, sort of still does. And she was a kind of a wild kid, and she was the youngest one. And there's this story about her like cartwheeling down the aisles of the Vatican while her like mortified family looked on.
Amazing.
And
I would love to see that sight.
Yeah, they were like, June.
Of course, yeah, the reverence for the place. But
she was like 3. And then my dad is an atheist. He would say he's an agnostic, but then you like push on that a little bit, and you're like, but he believes in Santa.
Does he, the spirit of Santa?
Yeah, he's like very, I mean, because he's been with my mom for so long, he sort of has this, he has a lot of language around Christianity, but anyway, so they met when they were 12. And I think for my mom's family, the fact that she was so wild meant that like it was fine for her to marry this kind of like half Protestant, half atheist, because they were like, just whoever can handle her, that's good.
What you told me already, but what was her birth order of 5?
Was the youngest.
Okay, so she was also the youngest. It was like she was just... Yeah. So she got away with it on that account as well. There was the pressure of following in any kind of religious familial footsteps was being taken care of by the elder children to some extent.
I think
siblings.
They were just like, they liked my dad, and they were like, if you can handle her, go forth.
Fantastic.
And be, prosperous. But anyway, I grew up in a household that basically straddled a line between my dad feeling very reverent of my mother's mother and wanting to be very respectful to her beliefs. And so we went to church, and I was confirmed, and I went to Sunday school, and I like...
Did you go to a public school?
I went to a public school, but we went to Catholic church and we did all that stuff.
Did you do CCD and stuff like that after like, is that after school or is that on Sunday?
Sundays, I think.
Yeah, so you're getting your like Catholic education to prepare you for confirmation through the church.
And I did First Communion and
Eliza, where are you growing up at this time?
Connecticut. But at the same time, like my dad saying that organized religion is kind of bullshit and that he sort of doesn't like it, and also not always coming to church with us and saying that he was going to stay home and quote worship in his own way.
So he would do this very out in front of your mother in that way. I mean, it wasn't something that he was doing off to the side with the kids and like, okay, let's respect your mom's point of view, but here's what dad is, and dad gets it in on the side. It's like your mother lived with him being very vocal about this.
Well, actually, I always thought they both felt that way.
Huh.
And that we were like performing organized religion because it was important to my grandmother and we loved my grandmother. And so it felt like a thing we were doing for her, like as a sort of respect thing, even though she didn't live near us. And I also think my dad had to, in order to get married in a Catholic church, he had to do all these classes. And so he would always say to me, even as a kid, like, well, listen, if you marry a Catholic, you need to have had this, which is like, I don't know why he thought I was going to marry a Catholic.
That's one of the ways that he justified it to you was like, if you marry a Catholic, at least I'm putting you through these things so you don't have to do this later in life.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So
But I remember the moment that my mom told me that she believed in God, and I was shocked.
How old were you?
I was a teenager. I was like 13 or 14.
So your relationship to this your whole life was you thought your dad's point of view was the shared point of view.
Yes.
And so your mother, although you knew that your grandmother was very devout.
Yeah.
And you were all like supposed to be good kids around her.
Yeah.
And that was a way of like honoring your mom and like, let's not rock the boat. I can play along.
Yeah.
But you were actually, as a teenager, you find out that your mother was more devout than you thought. And so she says that she believes in God. And how much further does the conversation go? Well,
I feel like I got ahead of myself there in that story because it has a lot to do with how I thought about it. Basically, like, I shared my dad's point of view. And I remember very distinctly, my his parents have a house in Vermont, like a farmhouse. And we spent every Christmas there and every summer. And I have it tattooed on my arm.
Oh, my gosh.
It's a very special place. And I remember...
Which arm?
This arm? You've seen it, I think.
Oh, yeah,
it's just like my the big house on my arm.
I forgot about this.
Yeah.
This is so great. This is the second time tattoos have come up. I wonder how often tattoos will come up in this conversation. Great. So that's okay. Go on.
And I remember being about like 5 or 6 years old and my dad like letting me stay up late and going up on the hill to look at the stars and looking out at the stars and him saying and asking questions about what was out there. And my dad, it's part of a lot of my writing because it was a really formative moment, but he didn't talk down to me, and like maybe he should have a little bit, but because he was like,
is that a joke or do you feel that way?
Well, I feel both ways because it made a huge impact on me. It's like a part of my writing, but it also scared the shit out of me. I asked him like, is there life out there? And he was like, well, we don't know, but there's not like human life. It's not like there's another planet of us. And, and he said, I think human beings are an aberration. And then this was part of your dialogue in the play, but like, he was like, I think that, if you think about how long the dinosaurs existed,
wow.
Compared to them, we're like a speck of dust, and eventually we'll disappear, and it'll be as if we were never here. Like he said that to me at 6 years old.
You were 6?
Yeah, and my cousin was with us, and my cousin also, he was a year younger than me. My dad's sister is like still mad at him about it,
right? Because
it was traumatic for him.
And was your dad's sister? She religious?
I think she's religious, but it was more just like, don't traumatize my 5-year-old.
Right.
And my dad, I think, thought it was a beautiful conversation, and it kind of was. It was just very scary. And I, the idea, because like at 6, you sort of think you're the center of the universe. So to realize both that you're not, and also that human beings aren't, and that we might, disappear and never be. I don't know. It was. So
how do you know? This is a magnificent conversation. So So how do you think about this with your own kids? Are you going to tell these things? Now, are you reticent at 6 when you have your very smart, inquisitive child?
I've already had these conversations.
Oh, you've already had them?
I fucked them up big time.
No, how did you fuck them up?
Well,
what does that mean?
Well, I have a 4.5-year-old, and he's very smart, and my husband is an atheist, and
do you define yourself as an atheist then too?
Yeah, I think it's more complicated than that for me, but like and it has to do with like sort of my evolution of thinking over time, but but yes, for most of my life I would consider myself an atheist. But my son has just started asking questions about what happens after you die. And I've said, because also my father-in-law passed away like when Graham was 2 or 18 months old or something. And he doesn't remember him, I don't think really, but he has said some really beautiful stuff about him. Like one time he was in like a hiking backpack on Zach's back, and
Zach is your husband.
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay. No, it's all good. That's my job.
And Graham was like pretending to take letters out of Zach's like hair, like taking like mail.
Aww.
And Zach's like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "I'm getting the mail." And he was like, "What is it?" And he's like, "It's a letter from Poppy," which is his. And what does it say? It says, "I love you." Like, it was just really sweet. Anyway, he talks about him all the time. I think because he's trying to grapple with the idea of where Poppy is.
Right.
And he's asked, like, "So where is Poppy?" And Zach says, "Well, he's dead." And he's like, "Well, what is that? So does he live outside?"
Wow.
And we're like, "No." Anyway, Zach has had these really beautiful conversations with Graham that have been I think he's been very honest. I got really panicky when he started asking me. And so I started saying, like, well, lots of people believe lots of different things. Like, some people believe in a place called heaven, and some people believe in reincarnation. Like, because also my parents' dog died. And so I said, some people believe that
around the same time,
no,
or like
about
around
a
the time
year
of this
ago,
conversation.
and so he thinks about Poppy and he thinks about Indy, the dog.
Okay. And
he's like, and I said, well, some people believe in reincarnation, and maybe Indy could come back as a person. And then Graham was like, wow, like he could be a person, and I could come back as a dog. And I said, yeah, maybe. And then he burst into tears and was like, I don't want to be a dog.
Wow.
I don't want to be a dog. And I was like, and then he's completely glommed on to the idea of reincarnation, but very specifically that you die and you become a dog.
Yes, of course.
And
oh my gosh.
Zach's like, Eli, what? Do you believe in reincarnation? I'm like, no, but I was just telling him some people do.
Yeah.
But my son believes that when you die, you become a dog.
Gosh, that's such an amazing hook on how the little child brain thinks. It's a very fascinating question. Actually, this is a great place to take a quick break, because I want to come back and talk more about exploring like how you want to continue having this conversation with your son. So we'll be right back. Hi, everyone. We're back with Eliza Clark. So right before the break, you were talking about this conflict. It's humorous, It also has, you can tell there's you have some genuine concern, maybe some regrets about how you started answering the first queries from your 4.5-year-old about like what happens when we die and what's going on in the world. So the question for you is, why do you think you answered it that way? And I think the reason I want to ask it like that is, you referenced earlier that you're an atheist, but it's complicated. And you said that your husband's an atheist, and you kind of made it like atheist full stop. Like he doesn't have any concerns about that. And of course, as I enjoy exploring in these conversations, we're going to talk about this is two different versions of being an atheist, as there are many different versions of being a Christian. And so for you then, why is it complicated? And is that complication one of the reasons that it was hard for you to answer your son's question with one direct answer?
Well, that's a lot.
There is a lot of question in there, but
good.
I just kind of like, that's the arc of where I want to go.
I think it's good. I think that, well, I'll start with I'll just start with whatever comes to my head. I read one parenting book when I was pregnant, and I think it was called Relax, It's Just God. Like it's like,
whoa,
what do you need?
I've never even heard of this book.
What do you need a book about talking to your children about God, like when you're about to have a newborn? Like I should have read a book that was like how to hold a baby, but I was like, no, I got that. I need to worry about how to talk about religion. And it was a book, I think that's what it's called, but it's a book that's about being an atheist, but talking to your children in a way that doesn't like push them away from you or like shut down their exploration. The book kind of makes the argument that if you like are really sort of adamant about religion being terrible, that you might end up with like a super religious kid.
Sure, right.
So
just because of the contrariness of kids on some level,
just like
right?
rebellion and
and there can't be anything so. I'm filling your thoughts for you. I don't need to be doing this, but but I think I'm responding because I feel a certain kinship to the idea, which is that if you speak in platitudes, they're meant to be interrogated. Like there's no.
Yes.
It's very difficult to have a thing that you say is this thing is full, true, no concerns outside of like certain scientific discoveries, and certain scientific discoveries, even on that level, will be interrogated. So anyway, continue on.
Yeah, I think that for me, the reason why it's complicated and has become complicated to me is that, my dad, my parents are amazing and I love them both very much. And because I love them very much and there's like some hero worship, I just sort of was happy to have like particularly my father's beliefs be my beliefs in a way that's kind of the way that religious kids are brought up. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
It's like there's a fundamentalism to atheism too.
Sure.
And
absolutely.
There, when I found out my mom believed in God, I was like 13 or something, 12 or 13, and I was going to this Christian youth group, and the only reason I was going to it was because it was like there were hot guys and it was like what everybody was doing, and it was basically like it was at night on a school night, and it was not, I wasn't really that interested in like the God part of it, but I was interested in the social part of it. And I remember being there and listening to a kid, I think it was a boy, talk about how his sister had died and how he was like, but he was okay. It was okay because she was in heaven, and I just like lost my shit a little bit. Like I remember like crying and being really upset about it, and just feeling bad for him.
Yeah.
Feeling bad for him that he didn't know the truth, that his sister was dead.
Oh,
and
I was trying to get at, like, where is the emotion coming from that you feel bad for him because you wished that he just accepted or knew that his sister wasn't coming back. It wasn't that you were feeling some of his pain, because his pain is genuine.
I think I felt bad for him that he was in pain and that he didn't know the truth. But I also think I was in pain for myself, because I was like, wouldn't it be great to feel that way?
Right.
The way he feels. And to be certain, the way that he feels so certain that he'll see her again.
Yeah.
And it really sort of like sparked this weird little like 13-year-old crisis in me. And I was doing lots of reading, I read Siddhartha and like all, and I just started, and then I remember having this really big fight with my dad around the same time, because I was like at home. My mom went back to work around the time I was like 12 or 13. And so I remember like I would come home from school and like eat something I wasn't really allowed to eat and like watch Oprah or something. And there was this Oprah where it was about miracles, and it was a very convincing miracle that I was watching at a tender age. And I told my dad about it. Kind of, I think, probably knowing what his response would be, but I was testing him. And I was like, this mirror, and I forget what it was exactly, but it was like a person who like had no ability to speak and then started reading the Bible or something and then could speak or something. It was like something like that. And my dad was like, yeah, like people do anything for whatever, or 15 minutes. Right.
Fame.
And he's kind of got this like conspiracy theory type brain anyway. Like, I mean, it's a liberal conspiracy theory, but it's not like, he's not Alex Jones, but he's got like, he's very smart. He's very scientifically minded, but he likes that, like he likes angles. And I just got really upset with him, and it like really, and I was like, you don't believe in anything, like as a little kid. And then I remember like,
but also kind of true.
Totally. Although I think he would say that's not true.
Okay.
I mean, and I understand him more now as an adult. But at the time I was like, so angry. You don't believe in anything. And like, I was just excited about this fucking Oprah miracle, Dad.
Yeah.
And I talked to my mom about it. And I remember in that conversation, as I'm crying about this, she said, well, I believe in God. And I was like, it blew my mind.
Wow.
I was like, what? How?
Yeah.
And I don't really think she said anything more about it. But it was like, I don't know. But she's very quiet about it. And she doesn't, I don't think, she doesn't go to church. She's not a Catholic anymore, really. I mean, maybe she would say she's a Catholic, but she doesn't like practice Catholicism. But she believes in God. And I was like, that's wild to me.
Yeah. So how many times have you had that conversation with your mother since?
None.
Never talked to her again about God or her beliefs?
No, I really should, though.
I mean, I don't know if you should or not. I mean, maybe you
Yeah.
shouldn't. Maybe you're doing it for the right reasons, But it sounds like you talk pretty openly with your dad about it.
Yeah, we
sounds
talk about that stuff all the time.
Yeah.
Well, he was just very opinionated about it and had a lot of thoughts about it.
Yeah, and obviously
yeah.
you referenced this, that you lean your father's way. And it sounds like, and so maybe one thing I had responded to earlier and something you talked about was that your dad calls himself an agnostic, even though he's really more of an atheist. Do you think that he, in a similar way to maybe you not wanting to press your mother for a conversation or something like that, have just been respectful to her point of view and not wanting to try to cross boundaries at any point, right? At a certain point, we realize like there's no reason to argue this or no reason to everyone to kind of join up on one level here.
I don't think that she would argue it though. Like I think I got the sense from her that it was just a really personal thing. Like it was just a personal belief and not something that she felt threatened by my father's beliefs.
Yeah.
And my dad always instilled sort of the values of Christianity, and he would call them Christian values too. Like, there was a lot of talk about kindness and taking care of people and, service and shame. I mean, that part was ingrained. My mom put a lot of emphasis on me being kind to other people in a way that was like totally well-intentioned. But I, being an anxious person, kind of internalized it in a way that was like at times overwhelming to me as a child.
Sure. I can relate to that. Yeah.
I did, like, for example, in my 5th grade talent show, I performed.
Oh, you're like embarrassed to say this.
No, I'm not. I'll tell you after.
Oh, okay. Well, I want to be respectful, but I'm sorry to my listeners who are not going to get the juice on that. But that's okay. We'll talk about it later.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I've had so many embarrassing things. I have a certain. Oh my gosh, yeah. It's amazing when you think back on. What's funny is I thought of 2 things, and one of them was when I pooped my pants in 2nd grade.
Oh yeah, terrible.
And I went to the bathroom. I knew I had to go. This is such a side run here, but I was just like, I went and I pulled my pants up, but I didn't pull them down fast enough or something, or they got caught, or they slipped off my thumb, or whatever happened.
Yeah.
And the eruption of tears and the just sheer shocking embarrassment of having to go back into the room to tell these things happen to children and they never leave you. And so actually this brings us back to...
I peed on stage in front of an audience.
Wow.
As a 6-year-old.
Wow.
In an off-Broadway play.
Yeah, that's absolutely fantastic. That's
twice,
really back-to-back nights. You're like, look, you like the 7 o'clock show. Yeah. And so here we are, right? We're talking about the things that happen to us when we're kids. And so so a lot of what we're talking about here, it really lit up for me, partly because of my point of view, right? I'm a father. Yeah. My son's a little bit younger than your oldest. And he hasn't quite gotten to these questions yet, although we're introducing them like little by little through different books and things.
Yeah.
But we're talking about how do you deliver information to a child so that the child is not both boxed in, but also not in a world of chaos, right?
Yeah,
you want the exactly. You want the children need to feel protected. And so one of the things you're talking about, and one of the jokes that you're talking about, is your father exposed you to these very big thoughts at a time when maybe you wonder if maybe you needed to be a little more protected.
One of the first plays I wrote, like in college, was this play. It doesn't really matter, but in it, there's a line where the main character, who's basically me, says, "God is dead. My father killed him when I was young."
Wow. Yeah.
And like, my dad thinks that's hilarious. And
I'm glad that you had a dad who could like laugh at that.
Totally.
Line.
I don't know how you feel, but like, I also just feel more and more as a parent that like, I don't think it's anything that I need to forgive, because it's like, it's just my dad was being himself, but it's like, he was just doing the best he could. He was trying to be honest. And honestly, like, he changed my worldview in a way that has been very valuable to me in my work. So I'm not like mad about it, but it is, I do see my child is very much like me, anxious, and afraid of things that in his imagination, he's imaginative, and like, I just recognize myself in him in lots of ways. And I think I'm like trying to have a do-over a little bit of like, Zach's telling him the truth, and however we perceive the truth.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of like, is it so bad for him to have a moment where maybe he could just think like he becomes a dog? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's I guess the question is, do you feel like, personally, do you let yourself, how have you adapted to that? So now, because you were saying it's complicated, and maybe what you're saying is there's a part of you that maybe at least still yearns, even though your intellectualism about it won't allow you to necessarily believe the argument, but you yearn to have something that's comforting about the afterlife. Or
I just see so much magic in the world.
Yeah.
And and that was something that my parents were sort of, regardless of religion, but like Christmas was a huge thing in our house. Like, then when I said earlier that my dad believes in Santa, like, right. I'm not really kidding. Like, my parents, we like hardcore, it was all magic. We would go to Vermont. Somebody in the family, and my dad's one of 7. So I have like all these cousins, and we're all very close. And so one of the uncles or the aunts or whatever would sneak off and dress up as Santa, and like the kids would be like, my grandfather would be reading the night before Christmas to us, and we'd hear jingle bells, and we'd run to the window, and like just off in the field, you'd see Santa walking away. And it was like, I 100% believed that I had seen Santa. Like, It was kind of divorced from Jesus, but it was like magic. And it was, the spirit of Christmas, reading the gift of the Magi, and like the sort of the values of Christmas, not really about Jesus, but about like, fellowship, your fellow man, goodwill on earth, peace on earth, like all of that stuff was so important to my family that like, it's all the things about Jesus. It's just without the Jesus part, kind of.
Right.
So I don't know where I was going with that, but I yearn for magic in my life. It's hard for me. And what I was saying before about like, just adopting my father's point of view, it's like I don't have the like science, you and I have talked about this when we talked about Brock, the character, but like I don't really have the scientific understanding of why I don't believe. I don't believe, and I think it's scientific, but I haven't like pressed on that very hard. So.
And you don't feel like you need to.
Well, it just feels like fundamentalism to me. For me to blindly say I'm an atheist, it feels like, well, that's just what I grew up with. Just like somebody who was born into fundamentalist Christianity grew up with that, and they say they believe in God because their parents believe in God.
Right.
And so I mean, I don't believe in God, but I have not, I have a sort of, I don't know, I have like a sarcastic way about me, about dealing with these issues that I have in recent years tried to press on a little bit. Like, why am I so disdainful of belief? Like, why am I so kind of caustic about it? Why am I so like liberal elite about the kind of like, you know, if I'm being, you know, why is my knee-jerk reaction to think that somebody who believes in something is stupid? Or, you know, not that I actually believe that,
no,
but like,
well, when you think in arguments, you think of, you know, this is an argumentative sort of thought, right? Like it's, you believe you've thought deeper on something and you think that there's only one right answer. And so the reaction is, well, then that person must be wrong. Why am I?
But to me, it's like the knee-jerk reaction of like, that person is stupid is also the kind of tribalism that I don't like about organized religion.
Right.
It's like, I'm right and you're wrong. Like, that's not really how I want to view the world. And I went through a kind of really deep depression right after Trump was elected that was not really related to Trump, but was sort of exacerbated by it. Like I'm just a chemically depressed person, but I had gone off of my antidepressants because I'd had a kid, and then I hadn't gone back on that because I'd been feeling kind of okay. And then it was like creeping up on me and I was feeling kind of not great, but like I also, you know, have a lot of resistance to medication for also reasons that have to do with my father.
Right. Yeah.
I love you, Dad, because I know you'll listen to this.
Yeah, I think of these things like, you know, I don't want to derail your story. Do you want to?
Well, it was like sort of sneaking up on me in a way that I couldn't, that I wasn't on top of. But I kept thinking I bleached my hair blonde. I I just was getting angrier and angrier and angrier about like the pussy grabbing, all that shit. I just was like, it was like igniting something in me that was commingling with my, you know, just chemical anxiety and depression. But I was like, but don't worry, Eli, you know, Hillary's going to win and everything's going to be okay. And then she didn't, and he won, and it just, my world kind of crumbled. And it was an implosion basically. And like to crawl out of it, I needed a lot of medication. And I also just needed, like, I took a break from drinking. I just was like, I need to, and it was like a very painful year, but a year that I knew even as it was happening, I was like, I will feel grateful for this time, but I hate this right now.
Oh man, do I get that.
And I do feel grateful for it, and I'm now out of it, and I feel great. But like, I mean, I feel terrible because my voice, but I don't feel
and
terrible.
And you're hungry because your child ate all your banana.
Yeah, I'm always hungry because they never let me eat. They look at me like, why would I share this with you? Anyway,
but you're stronger. You know,
totally.
you have now, it sounds like what you're saying is you've anchored yourself in certain ways or let go of certain anchors, whichever way you want the kind of metaphor to work, that, you know, you are stronger and both free of certain like vulnerabilities.
I just was trying, as part of that experience, and like, I'm just a person, you know, I guess I grew up Catholic, but it's sort of a waspy way of being, but just like that your happiness is something that you're in control of, and you need to like pick yourself up and be okay. And I have, you know, over the course of my life realized that that's not something that is entirely true. And I don't like feeling my feelings, hence the drinking. I mean, I wasn't like a problem drinker, but like I do enjoy a glass of wine
this is
or
incredibly
three
common
in order to like not feel my feelings. And I was like, I gotta not do that. I gotta feel what I'm feeling. I gotta like get my head around it. This is gonna be terrible and painful. And part of that was like letting go of the idea that I knew everything.
Yeah. The fact that you have shared this so brazenly, like so openly, is, I think, a real gift. So I appreciate that. And this is a moment where we got to take a quick breather, but then we'll be right back. One of the things that Eliza and I were talking about after the break was the sensitivity of talking about these types of subjects with parents listening that love you and that you love, and that you may not believe exactly what they believe or what they raised you to believe. And I really identify with that. I was telling her that, there's basically two people in my life who I'm worried about hurting their feelings, and it's my parents.
Yeah.
And it's because I love them so much, and I appreciate so much of what they've given me. At the same time, children, from the parents' perspective, need to become independent, and they need to follow what they are. And then from my perspective, because I was the child once, and now I'm the dad, I'm both now, I needed to follow this road because, as I was telling Eliza before we started recording, there's a reason I'm doing this show. It's something I love. It's a conversation I love, but it's difficult for some people. Some people don't want to think about this, or some people have very, very fundamentalist views, as you said. And I think very eloquently and very importantly, you mentioned that fundamentalism exists both on an atheistic side and on a religious side. And we have to be careful about how stringent we are with our rules. And so having this conversation with people that I respect, over and over again, only reminds me how much I love just living in a world of conversation about it, and not so much about believing one thing entirely. But I understand that at times, by not believing in one thing entirely, you ruffle feathers. And so that's part of what this conversation is about too, is just about bringing something to people that's challenging. And so anyway, you're talking about, how it feels to open up about this with parents that you will, I'm sure, will love this conversation, and it will all be fine, but we're sensitive to it nonetheless.
My parents have already dealt with the fact that I'm a writer and that I mine their lives for content. I mean,
right, you've been doing this for years.
Yes, and they are super supportive of me. And I mean, I think what's kind of interesting is that my dad insists that he's an agnostic, and actually more and more I can see how that might be true. And so part of what's interesting about this conversation is thinking about it from my perspective as a parent. I perceived my dad's beliefs in a certain way that I think he wouldn't categorize them as. He would say, that's not what I meant. And I'm like, but here's what I heard.
Right.
And it's just really interesting. And I just kind of worship my dad. And that's why I am a 33-year-old woman who just for the first time is maybe I should think about this for myself.
Yeah.
But I also probably, will land back in a place where he is. But that's
No, but this is perfect jumping off point for my next question, which is, so where do you feel like where you're proud of what you're building as a spiritual sort of structure, or a magic adjacent structure for your family and your children, right? You talk about, you have a reverence for the magic that was created at Christmas, and the magic that you see in the world.
We have fairy doors on the trees in our yard.
Oh.
Yeah, and fairies come through them sometimes and leave things.
Oh, how beautiful. So you guys will plan almost like little tooth fairy, kind of things, but they're random.
They're random.
Oh.
I think for me, I don't know that I have a spiritual life. I mean, I want to, and I think I get that through experiences. I get that through theater. I get that through sitting in a room with people. I get that through singing. One of the things I miss about church is singing with people. Like when I'm at like a Dodgers game and everyone sings Take Me Out to the Ball Game, like I get teary-eyed. Like I cry at the Star Spangled Banner, and it's not because of my like immense patriotism. It's just like everybody singing together is beautiful. And like my, two of my best friends and I will get together and we'll like go do karaoke, and I force them to, it's like my best friend from high school and my best friend from college, and they didn't know each other. I like brought them together. Now they're very, very close friends, and the three of us will go and I'll like make them sing. Make them sing. They love it. They fucking love it. But like we'll sing like "Hold On" by Wilson Phillips in 3-part harmony, or we'll sing like
that's such a classic.
"The Rose" or whatever, and we sing it in 3-part harmony. And the whole time, the three of us are like, "This is so embarrassing." Like, but we love it. Like we learned that song. We learned "Call Your Girlfriend" with the cups and doing the cup thing. Yeah. And like it was so. That kind of thing to me actually like is spiritual. Like hearing my voice in harmony with another person's voice is where like God lives. You know what I mean? Because I'm such a good singer.
Yeah.
No, just because there's a way that resonates in your like bones that is incredible. And I feel the same way about like when you're in a theater and you're sitting with people in silence and something happens and it's like scary. And you're like, we all know that this is a theater and that those people are actors and that this is a play. But like, I'm afraid or I feel sick or I feel whatever. And like the ability of human beings to like create that and then to create that in a room together is magic. It's magic.
Yeah.
And so the first part of my quote unquote spiritual journey is just trying to examine my disdain for belief. Like just trying to go like, why does it matter to me so much that I know that I'm just so judgmental? Like, why do I need to be that way? Why do I need to be right about this when nobody knows? And so that's where I am. I mean, whether I will ever come out of the other end of that with some other belief, I don't know. But like, my husband bought me a tarot deck and I was like, this is hilarious. But like, I've not learned how to use it, but I am very excited.
I had a tarot reading that was like, I had a tarot reading once that was really powerful, and I sort of lived with it for a while and let it resonate for a while, and then I was like, okay, I get it. Like I sort of let myself be wooed by this, but also it was kind of nice to be wooed by it. It was kind of nice to feel like we were having a sort of above reality discussion about who I am and what's coming for me. There's something playful about it. There's something...
Totally.
Yeah. So,
I feel that way about therapy. It's like I go to therapy and my therapist and I talk about whatever I want to talk about and she listens.
I talk about what I like to talk about too in therapy, just so you know. I don't know why I felt like that was so coy. I don't know why I felt like saying that.
Every once in a while, my therapist will be like, yeah. Okay, but let's cut to the chase here or whatever.
Yeah, right.
She doesn't say it like that, but every once in a while she asks a question where you're like, oh yeah, she's pointing out something.
Right.
She's saying, this is a pointed question. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that to me, there's something spiritual about that experience, about talking out loud, and then by the end of the conversation, something comes out of you that you didn't know that was going to come out of you. Like maybe all of that is, synapses firing in our brain, and maybe all of like, I guess I just don't want to believe that like my love for my husband is chemical, and that my love for my children is just biological, and that my life is meaningless. I mean, not that God gives it meaning, but just I believe that the human experience is so joyful and painful and like it's just all of those things at once. It's so special that there has to be magic in the world.
And I think that's obviously very beautiful. But I feel like what you're saying, if you don't mind me asking a follow-up question on that, is because you referenced something really big, right? You use the word meaningless. You use the word
I know.
And you caught yourself.
I know.
And you're like, not that God gives it meaning, but it's almost like you were like not. Maybe you are. You're circling what you're doing, and I'm not saying it's clear that you're not saying one thing.
Yeah.
But you're circling something right now, which is life meaningless without an afterlife or without a larger purpose or without a sort of...
I don't believe in an afterlife.
Okay.
I don't. I mean, so I don't know that it's... My dad actually would say, when I would press him on his beliefs, he would say, I believe there's something special that binds us that can't be explained. And I think that ultimately is sort of what I'm talking about.
Right.
Like that there is something, and it's not just our hormones and our brain chemistry and our, instincts and I think there is something special.
Well, yeah, I entirely agree with that. I mean, one of the things, and I've said this before on this show, is a very simple observation, but, we are still trying to figure out if the Big Bang is ultimately the sort of winning theory that it works right now for where everything we know. But if we ultimately find out something else or whatever, that will be the new mystery. But let's just say the Big Bang is how it happened. Then how do we get the Big Bang, right? So what comes before the Big Bang? This is a great mystery. Whereas, and these are the new mysteries. This is the frontier of mystery today, of the present we live in. There have been frontiers of mystery all throughout human existence since consciousness. And what will be the next mystery? And so what we're talking about when we talk about things like fundamentalism is our wariness of someone that's trying to answer a mystery today that's going to change tomorrow. But at the same time, there always seems to be this another level of intense mystery to the universe we live in, to the world we live in. And undoubtedly, there is an energetic force that binds us. That is scientific. There is energy in the world. We live in a way with each other that is cause and effect in energy. Yeah. And even on a basic level, where we don't have to say anything more about that. What does that mean? What does that represent? Who is represented by that? Is nothing represented by that? Just by existing next to each other, we exist in something that is universal. And so that's, I only go into that because, one, I don't know, I think about it. And two, I think it's just my way of saying that, it's just reflecting back for you what I feel like I'm hearing you say, which is that you're circling around what is, people throw this word meaningless around. And what are we saying when we say that? And what are we saying when we think, can we live with just that? That's what a lot of people, atheists, can you live with that? And some do, and they live fervently. You look at someone like Christopher Hitchens, who was just like beautifully antagonistic, and lived in this hyper...
He also wrote Why Women Aren't Funny.
Right. So you're right about that.
Christopher Hitchens.
You're right about that.
Or he's right about that. Women aren't funny.
No, that's not true. And also, you're right. But, you're right. You're right about that. I mean, he was a prick. But
also, that article was so stupid. I was like,
I didn't
fuck
read the article.
Christopher.
I did hear that. Yeah. I haven't read that article.
It was dumb. He was wrong.
Was he not being funny in the article?
No, he was deeply unfunny. And he also was like, I can't remember it exactly because it came out when I was in college, but it was like, women aren't funny unless they're unattractive. And then or something. It was very. Oh wow! It was gross.
Yeah, that is gross.
Yeah, but he had other good ideas.
He had other good ideas, but I guess what I'm saying is, no. Look, this should be.
People aren't perfect.
This should be heard. He deserves to catch shit for what he deserves to catch shit for. Yeah. But he is a firebrand in one direction, and we get to choose how we live with it. I don't know. I don't want to drift off either here too far, but we're talking about how you organize making the choice around living with. What is enough and what isn't enough. Do you feel like so your husband doesn't live with any sort of conflict around this?
you'd have to ask him, but like, I don't think, I mean, his dad died, and it was, he talked about like, our son was 2, and then he came home and he said, "Daddy," and he heard it in a completely new way. And like, he wrote this kind of beautiful Instagram post that's very funny about his dad on Father's Day. Like, I think right after he died, like the next year, that was like, I'm missing this dad today, but I'm also aware that like, he's dead, and that even if there isn't a heaven, which there isn't, like, he's up there, not able to read Instagram because he does, like whatever. Right. It was a very funny, but like, he's dealing with grief, and that's an interesting, I don't know. I mean, it's an interesting thing to have to grapple with in a more real way. And I haven't, I've lost people that were important to me, but my grandfather, my dad's dad, died when I was, a few years ago, and it was really hard because he was a really important person in my life, but he was also very, very vocal about his beliefs, which were that life ends and then you're done, and that he was okay with that, and so that made it kind of okay for me. Sort of, and that he was kind of in pain at the end, and he was ready to go. But also it's still horrible. It's still horrible to lose somebody.
Yes.
Whether or not they're old and they lived a great life, it doesn't really matter. I mean, obviously that's the preference, but you still miss them, and I don't know.
And you live with their memories. And that's another thing, right? And how do we relate to the memory?
Yeah.
Some people use that as a conversation that they keep alive and feel like that person exists.
Yeah.
But I mean, I lost my grandmother, and sometimes I still wake up and I'm like, oh my God, she's dead.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wait, how is she dead? She feels so alive to me.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah.
That she feels so alive to me? And then when people get to kind of feel that the way they want to about that, they can make the choice that, no, she is alive to me in a way that's spiritual, or she's not alive, but she's in my memory, and so I keep her alive.
I just feel like, there's a sort of electric pulse that I get in certain places, and when I read certain things, or when I have a really good conversation, or like that, I just feel, I don't know, there's something otherworldly about it. Like the sort of, you read a book and it like electrifies something in you, or you see a piece of theater and it does the same thing. Like you hear music and it like awakens something in your bones, and that you can't explain. And I just feel like that's my religion. I don't know. Like, look, my religion is Santa. It comes back around. Like, I had a magical childhood, and I want my kids to have a magical childhood. I remember, the first Christmas where I was like 14 or something, and I was excited to be downstairs with the grown-ups, putting presents under the tree and being Santa. I was excited about it because I was old and whatever is cool. And then I was old, like 14. That's too old. But I was like, I was there, and then I was like, you know what? I don't want to do this. Like, I want to go upstairs and be awakened by the stocking at the end of my bed. Like, I know my parents are filling it, but I want to go upstairs right now and go to sleep. Like, I want to believe in magic, and I do.
Ugh. What a perfect ending. I mean, you really nailed it. Are you a writer? I'm so thankful for these conversations. I'm so thankful that you came in. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for being so generous.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you all for listening. I'll see you next time.